Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell, and we are your hosts for yet another deep dive into all things book marketing. But I have to start off the show with I got a call, and the caller ID said, "Our film company." I took a screenshot of it because it was just so scary and hilarious at the same time. And obviously I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail is up on our socials. And if you're on Instagram, I still have to put it on my personal Facebook page. So if you follow me there, I'll add it. It'll be up by the time this show airs. And it was this is the craziest thing. So 23 books that I have out. A couple of them are actually fiction that I wrote years and years ago. But the book that they were calling about that they wanted to turn into a movie was Get Published Today. And the guy he's like leaving me a message. He's like, "We want to turn Get Published Today into a movie." And he didn't even start laughing. Like, how can you say that? How can you know what this title is and think that it would be a good movie? Like, I almost wanted to call him back, but then I got worried that it was some sort of like when they say, like, when you call somebody, like, they have access to your phone and all this stuff. Maybe I listen to way too much true crime. I don't know. But Amy, you heard this voicemail too. I mean, it was kind of crazy, right?
It was both like impressively deceptive, but also clearly ridiculous. You know what I mean? It was just like, but I imagine I try to, the context, I try to put in context for somebody else that actually has written a book that could potentially, you know what I mean? Like, it was just all sorts of wrong for your title in particular, but it's like, wow, for somebody that is new to the industry, that actually has written a book that is in a genre that typically, has books made into movies, it would get very overwhelming and enticing.
It's very enticing. Yeah, because I've been getting these emails, and I wrote that guy back that time. We were actually live on the show and I wrote him back. I wrote the guy back and they wrote me back, and they're like, "Let's set up a call." And that's kind of where I like, I don't know, and they want to do a call on WhatsApp. I'm like, oh my gosh, red flags all over the place. But we also got an email this week. I think it was this week, or maybe it was late last week anyway. Sometimes they all blend together, but this guy said that Netflix, was it Netflix? I can't remember. It was Netflix. It was one of the Amazon Prime, whatever, wants to turn his book into a movie, TV series. And they were like, "Oh, it's going to be as big as blah, blah." And they cited a whole bunch of really big blockbuster movies. And so Amy sent me the cover, and the cover is bad. And the book has a limited, like a 2-sentence description and no reviews. And I know we're talking about author bios in the show, and we won't stay on this topic for very long, but let me just say this about that. Netflix is not going to buy a book that has no reviews and no book. I mean, this is not going to happen. So I'm sorry. I'm just going to save you all a lot of money. I wanted to write this guy and be like, "How much money have you sent them?" Because I bet you I want to say that I got an email, and one of the amounts was like $300,000 that they need, right? To turn this. Oh, yeah. And so then the minute that you send that, obviously, the minute that you send that, they cease all communication and they're gone, and the email no longer works. I wanted to write it, how much money have you sent them? Anyway, I didn't, because whatever, like, we all have to, I mean, it's hard. Like, you can't save everybody, but make smart decisions, people. If you're getting calls like this, if you're getting emails like this, don't, I mean, I want my life turned into a movie, although that would be weird in spots. Let me just say that. But it's just not going to happen. First off, I just don't, and it's not defeatist, it's just it's realist. So if you're getting emails like that, I mean, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of these emails floating around right now. And like I said, that one that I got said, "Oh, we're calling from Amazon." I actually forwarded that email to Amazon. I'm like, "Hey, just so you know, you're being impersonated yet again." So I'm sure that if I write that email back now, that it'll bounce. But anyway, so just be careful. Be careful out there. And I know this was a listener request. Actually, this is a listener request from an author that we are currently working with. So that's very cool. About author bios and the importance of author bios. We talk about this a lot, but usually we talk about it in context of make sure that your Amazon book page is, tightened up, make sure that it looks good, make sure that you have a good book description. But we haven't really spent a lot of time talking through your bio, which we're also going to talk about author photos. And we are going to divide this up into fiction and nonfiction because for each of these segments is very different. Amy, do you want to lead us off? Because I know you see a lot of these when you're doing Amazon retail page evaluations.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I go for, and maybe it'll sound a little woo-woo, but when I read the bio, I really try to be objective and kind of get a feel for the vibe, right?
Yeah.
So you know what the book is, you've seen the cover, you've read the description, you check out the author bio, and I want to see how that flows and if it makes sense and if it makes me more interested in the author, if it makes me more interested in the book, or if it completely jars me out of that kind of headspace that I was in reading about this book and potentially buying it to all of a sudden like, oh, okay, wait, now we're back to reality. And I think that's the biggest kind of nuance that a lot of people lose sight of is that your bio has to match your author brand, but it also needs to speak to your reader market. It should flow. It should make sense. And I get it. A lot of people write different books and you write in different, some authors even write in different genres, which gets a little bit trickier. But for the most part, you really want to think about the fact that your author bio can either add value to or decrease the value of someone's first impression of your work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, very true. And I think that, as somebody who buys and reads a lot, I do look at the author bio just as a consumer to say, okay, so if I'm buying this book on, I don't know, organizational or how to be a more effective leader or something, I want to know what's this person's background? Like, why should I be taking advice from you over the other author? You know what I mean? So all those things have to really be looked at. And I think, for fiction, I want to know what drives you to write cozy mystery, or why, are you a really big sci-fi geek? Like, is that why you're writing sci-fi? Like, can you quote every Star Wars movie? Because then you are my best friend, my new best friend. But, those kinds of nuances, like Amy was saying, are really critically important.
Absolutely. I think I always find it very charming and endearing when authors, especially for fiction, name, the authors that really turn them on to the genre that they write in. I find that very relatable. Yeah. Like I started reading this and this and this when I was younger or when I was in college, or it could even be more recently, but it makes it so much easier for your potential buyer to think, okay, like they're in this with me. They're one of me. You know what I mean? They like this genre. They read in this genre. And another element of this too is also, and to match the branding, is if your brand, again, it gets a little more complicated when somebody writes in different genres and categories and things like that. But that is definitely the minority versus the majority. But you also want it to be an extension of your writing. So if you play up the fact that there is a humor element to your work, then be humorous in your bio. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be silly, but be clever. You know what I mean? Put a line in there that'll make somebody go, oh, okay, like I see what they're doing. You know what I mean? That makes it's that added touch that shows, you know what I mean? Again, that your head is in this. And we say that a lot with a number of other shows across different topics. Take yourself seriously, and it'll show your readers that you take them seriously as well. So your bio should not be a throwaway. And Penny, we talk about this too, where there's also the mistake of including too much in the hopes that you don't forget something, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, this is your bio, it's not your entire resume.
Right.
Right. Sorry,
Or
I didn't
your
mean to sound.
or your entire life story. Like, you know, I was reading a bio recently. It was actually a pretty cool cover, and it was a historical mystery. But then the person's bio talked about, you know, what they like to do with their parents growing up, which, okay, that's cute. Nothing related to the book, the theme, the anything. I was really kind of surprised. I mean, I had recommended that, you know, there's other ways to include that. There's a, you know, we've talked about Author Central a lot. There's a lot of different features of Author Central where you can go into literal deep dives of your background, your research, your history with something. You know what I mean? There's so many other ways to do this, but your bio really needs to stay punchy and interesting. And so, you know, defaulting to putting the whole kitchen sink in there, hoping that, well, anybody's going to find something about me they like, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, because it's really I mean, we always talk about how details matter. And this is a detail that matters to your readers. And I think to overlook it, you want to mirror your genre. So we talked about, Amy mentioned about being humorous. And I talked about like the sci-fi example of like, oh my gosh, I'm such a Star Wars geek, whatever. But I think that you really it is the part of the detail that a lot of times authors overlook. Like, oh, what do I want to say about myself? And a lot of times authors don't really like to brag either, right? So if you've won an award, or if you have, if there's something that that is worthy of bragging rights that ties into your book, mention it in your bio. I mean, I think, and the other piece of it though too is that bios are evolving things. So as your book wins, awards or gets honorable mentions or something, obviously that's going to go in that should go in the book description. But you could also mention it in your bio without getting too long or too long-winded or whatever. I mean, I think that your bio is a way of, it's a handshake with the readers, right? It's a way of introducing you to the reader, introducing yourself to the reader with enough thoughtful details that make you interesting without oversharing too much where the reader kind of glosses over. And the other piece of it, then Amy, I'll turn it back over to you. But the other piece of it though too is now with the new Author Central changes, your bio is really front and center. So the first thing that they see is your author bio, right?
That's such a good point. Yep. And sorry, everybody, I had a kiddo alert on my phone. This is how real life this is. So I appreciate your patience with that little interlude. It was like, my life is normally not that interesting, but every once in a while, I do have to remember something related to the small people in my life. And that was that.
Is everything okay? Do we need to pause the show and finish up?
No, everybody's fine.
Okay, good.
But I love your point that you mentioned the Author Central aspect of it too, Penny, because I noticed that a lot. And it's interesting because it also, the way it's featured on Author Central, it's kind of got that added element of, it makes it more critical that you can only see so much of your bio at once. It's kind of like that preview, let's say, you
Yeah.
know, and you can expand it and people can read more. But to your point about how important this is, and think about both views, not just on your retail book page, but on your Amazon Author Central page as well, you really want to make sure you capture their attention within that preview. You know what I mean? So don't go for the slow burn, really hit them with something interesting to catch their attention right away, you know, and then they may opt to expand and read more. But it'll show up the same on your retail page. But that's such a good point, is that you really, similar to your book description, like we've talked about, you don't want to do a slow burn with your book description, because that's assuming somebody will spend that long waiting to be enticed, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with your bio. You really want to start off very, very strong. And then if there's other things like Penny mentioned, you know, if there's other things that are really applicable to your platform, your background, your expertise, things like that, put them in there, but be really thoughtful about the order in which you put things, and don't necessarily do that build up to the good stuff. Kind of flip the script on that and start with the really great stuff and then go into the supporting elements.
Exactly. And then I think the other part of this too is what pairs with this is going to be your author photo. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just say, do not get a current picture, people. Like, I get it. You know, sometimes I look at pictures, like there's a great line in a Jim Gaffigan comedy. Like, have you ever looked at a picture of yourself and it just ruined your whole day? I've had that happen. Amy's had that happen. We get it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But please get a current picture of yourself. And I see this because, you know, if you're going to be doing like, I mean, uh, we led off this podcast talking about, you know, these scammers, you know, dangling fame and fortune. And I like, I get it. Like, but that's an extreme example. But at some point, you could show up at an author books, and I've seen this happen, right? Where an author shows up at a book signing with a picture that's literally like 30 years old, and
Mm.
the bookstore people put the picture of the book and then the picture of the author. Oh my gosh. Because that's what they had to work with, right?
Right.
On
And
the poster. Yeah. And
that's hilarious.
you
And
see
it's so funny you mentioned that, because I've seen something similar, but with a podcast interview, Penny. Something very similar where I thought I knew what this author looked like based on the quote unquote like public, you know, photo that they've put out there. But then you go to the interview and it's like, I thought, wait, and it's almost, it took my brain a second to realize, okay, no, I'm in the right place. Like that's who that is now. Okay, you know. But it's like,
yeah.
don't do that to people. There's no need.
Don't
Like,
do that to people. I mean, I literally, like, I didn't say this, but I mean, I walked up to the table wondering if her mom, because it was a 30-year-old picture, Amy. Like, I
right.
wondered if it was like, is your mom standing in for you? What's going on right now? Um, Take a current picture and have some fun with this. Like, if you wrote, like, okay, so, you know, if you wrote a business book, if you have a nonfiction something, if you wrote a cookbook, get a picture of you in a kitchen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something professional. If you have if you have a business book or something like that. My picture is kind of I I still look like this picture, just so y'all know. It's a few years old, but like I'm kind of looking off at the books, and it's kind of a fun, it's a professional, but yet it's kind of fun. And I like that
Mm-hmm.
vibe because that's kind of how I roll.
Right.
Um, if you have, you know, if you've written like a cozy mystery, I saw an author one time who had a cozy mystery, and she actually had like a Sherlock Holmes hat on and a little
Love it.
magnifying. I mean, it was great. I thought it was just so perfect. So
I know.
have a little bit of fun with this. Show your personality, right?
Right. And Penny, can we talk about inanimate objects as author
Oh
photos?
my gosh,
And
yes, please lead this parade, Amy, because
I know, yeah, like unless there are serious issues with hiding your identity, then please don't use inanimate objects as your author photo, because, and I hate that this is where we're at with it, but sadly, it makes you look less professional, because there are too many bots and spammers and things like that out there in the publishing industry right now that are doing underhanded things. And it just, sadly, in my opinion, those kind of things, or even using avatars, you know, those kind of things come off as less authentic now. And I'm sorry if that's, you know, if that's what you want to go with. It's nothing personal. And it's really more about, again, where we're at with publishing right now and how much more careful you need to be about owning your brand and protecting your brand. And it's a lot harder to be taken advantage of if you're using a professional photo that is current and things like that. But inanimate objects and even avatars, I mean, that was cute and it was being used for a while, but it's gotten to the point now, Penny, where even when I see an avatar, I'm like, oh, it's leaning toward the less serious side, but not in a fun, creative way, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think there's like, you know, if you've written under a pen name, we had an author who wrote under a pen name, and her author photo was just like she was looking over the top of a book, so you couldn't really tell who she was. So, you know, I get it.
Wigs, hats, you know?
What?
I said there are wigs, there are hats, there are glasses. You know what I mean? As you said, there.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's all
props. There's so many fun ways to do it.
Yeah.
And if you work with, I think if you work with a real photographer, you know, that actually does headshots and explain the situation you're in, a good photographer will probably have some really brilliant ideas that you'd never even considered, you know, that'll help protect your identity if that's important to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I've talked to some, sometimes at conferences, they have headshot photographers, which listen to me, authors. If you were at a conference and they have photographers there, take advantage of it because it's usually a really good price. They don't really have the flexibility to like go on location because they're pretty much, you know, you have probably a booth with, you know, 5 or 6 different backgrounds or whatever, but they take advantage of it. Get a current headshot. Look, we all want to be, you know, whatever, but I get it, but get a current headshot. Don't be the author who looks like her mom that I run into at a book event where I'm glad I didn't say anything. I felt so bad. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the same person. What are you doing? I see this a lot at writers' conferences when speakers don't update their pictures.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, and you're sort of like, oh, okay, well, I guess that picture is like 40 years old or something, you know, but
I know at least once a decade, we need to update the media kits, right?
for sure. But anyway, I mean, I think that, you know, the author bio is often overlooked. It's very important. The author bio goes hand in hand with your headshot, but it is all part of your brand. So I think everything, again, as we have always said on the show, everything matters to your readers. If you're a seasoned author and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't looked at my bio, now's a really good chance to update it and have some, I mean, if it's appropriate, obviously have some fun with it. I was I've judged the Ben Franklin Awards for my BPA for a couple of years. And I was judging this at one of the books, and it was a parenting book, but it was a humorous parenting book, right? And this author's bio, I never heard back from her, but I actually wrote to her. This author's bio was hilarious, right?
I love that.
And it was something that, you know, that she was so on brand with this, with her book, that she really understood her audience. You know what I mean?
And her yes, and her voice probably, right?
And her voice. Yeah, exactly. So when appropriate, have some fun with this. Go through your bio, make sure that you're really addressing all the high points. If you meandered on about all the dogs and cats and whatever that you own, but it doesn't relate necessarily to your book, that take those out. We love Fido. Obviously, Amy, and you all know Amy and I are big animal lovers, but if it doesn't, like, I think Cosmo is the best dog on the planet, with the exception maybe of Amy's dogs. But I don't mention him in my bio. I mention him when I'm at conferences, like, all the time. To the point that
there's a time and a place, right?
There's a time and a place to mention the pup. All right. Well, we love show ideas wherever you listen to. We love show ideas. We love reviews. Do take a look. Do go onto our Instagram or Facebook. or whatever and listen to that audio recording of that scammer, because it's pretty impressive how sophisticated that they've gotten. And we'd love your feedback on shows, and do send this podcast to some people who could, we think could really benefit by it. Maybe even send it to your writers group. And we will see you next time. This is Penny Sansevieri and Amy Cornell. Bye-bye.